All right, it's 3:30. So we will call to order the special meeting of the Traverse Bay Area Intermediate School District Board of Education. Dr. Seglerik, would you please call the roll?
Brown.
Here.
Shear.
Here.
Carpenter.
Here.
Berge. Not yet. McKellar. Okay, not yet. Tank. Not yet. And Fisher.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item D, we need a motion to approve the agenda, please.
I'll make the motion to approve or support.
It appears that there's a motion and a support. Is there discussion? Go ahead, Dr. Seglerik, with a roll call. Please.
Brown.
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Carpenter.
Yes.
McKellar. Berge.
Yes.
Hi, Rachel. And Tank.
Yeah, I assume we're taking roll here. So yes, I'm here.
And Fisher.
Yes, thank you. We are at that point in the agenda for a welcome to all of you who have chosen to be with us this afternoon in this special meeting. Has anyone raised their hand to speak to us through public comment?
Good afternoon, Mr. Fisher. We have not received anything on comments, but if anyone would like to make a comment, this is the time that they can do that.
Thank you, Renee. Well, it appears that there is no one that chooses to take advantage of the public comment opportunity. And so we'll move on to item 2, the sale update. Dr. Seglerik.
Yes, thank you, President Fisher. And it's great to see so many wonderful faces that have been working very, very hard throughout this pandemic, not just on their own area of expertise in serving our children and our families, but also helping our organization move forward with following through on our strategic plan. As you are aware, Board, you adopted our strategic plan that focuses our efforts around specific goals. And today is an opportunity for our co-leaders to provide you an update on the tremendous progress and work that their committees have been making. And then this will be kind of an intermediate step. We'll be following up in May for any potential additional action items that may be necessary to move our work forward. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to start. Just as a reminder, when your committee slides are up, the co-leaders can just unmute yourself and then begin. I think we'll first start with a quick update from our Transportation Committee. So co-leaders Sean Biddle and Mark Wills. So let's see if I can share my screen. Can I get a thumbs up that you can see the shared screen? Perfect, thank you. And I'm going to present. And we'll start with phase 1 progress updates.
All right. Good afternoon, TBAISD board members and esteemed colleagues here. And thank you, Dr. Seglerik, for that lead-in. As a co-chair in supporting our phase 1 identified goal here with explore and evaluate student transportation structure and systems, it's very reminiscent, if you will, as we presented back in May. So what I'm going to highlight today is really focusing on some of the outcomes of the committee from phase 1, looking at what we're doing in partnership with Dean Transportation as we progress monitor, and then ultimately some of the artifacts that came out as a result of our committee work. I'm trying to pan over the slide, but I printed it off, so I'm having technical difficulties here. But first goal or objective was by September 2020, we were looking at improving students' experience while being transported as measured by incident reports. So one of the outcomes of that, and recognizing that this is going to be an ongoing partnership as well as conversation, a subcommittee was formed of TBAISD and Dean Transportation staff. And we developed an action plan where we're starting to explore an annual training calendar to support the use of Crisis Prevention Institute, as well as positive behavior intervention support behavior models. Also, as center-based supervisors, we're also reviewing transportation incident reports on a quarterly basis. So again, we're kind of using that as our baseline as well as a benchmark to look at that overall riding experience for our students. The second objective, by January 2020, transportation will implement additional routes to reduce the overall travel time for students on a bus, with 90% of those student routes at 2 hours or less. So prior to the closure in December of 2020, Dean had reported 88% of students experience ride times of 2 hours or less. And again, an ongoing or a current committee that's in addition, outside of the SAIL committee, is Regional Transportation Consortium, is reviewing student ride times and working with Dean Transportation on this goal. So we will continue to progress monitor that, and as a subcommittee looking at both of those data points. The next objective here on the slide, by June 2020, we will increase communication and data sharing with internal and external stakeholders with protocols in place. And this led us to the development of artifacts. And the first one is a transportation communication protocol that was created and implemented by TBA, ISD, and Dean Transportation staff. And then the protocol is being periodically reviewed by staff from both organizations. And again, I just want to thank Sean Biddle as co-chair, Linda Bilecki, and Carol Greilick, and as our cabinet members supporting this committee. And also want to recognize Fred Dolker, Dean Transportation, and one of their fellow CPI instructors, Jeff DeRosa, Mansalona Schools, Carrie Gaudette, Becky Goodwin, Marty Ann Guiney, Jade Leidix, Dean Transportation Supervisor, Marv Nordine, and Jeff Tousley from Frankfurt, Alberta Schools. What questions might you have?
Great, thanks, Mark. Really appreciate that update. And I know that we have also formed a transportation subcommittee of superintendents that is trying to move this work forward with Dean as well and meeting on a very regular basis. So thank you for that. Next, we'll go to Tina Shellick, Sarah Ulrey, and I think Matt Olson might be pitch hitting for a situation that came up with Sarah, I think.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Skolaric. I do want to just recognize on behalf of Sarah. Sarah had agreed to present on behalf of herself and Tina, as Tina had a conflict today. But unfortunately, Sarah ended up with a family emergency. So I'm going to do my best to pinch hit, but I really want to thank them for their work as well as all the other members of the committee. The goal here being to develop a structure and process to increase understanding of our ISD roles, supports, and programming. There are two primary objectives that the committee's been working on. The first being to, as you can see here, define and organize an internal comprehensive repository with roles, supports, and programming. And what they did here is they've begun with our organizational chart. That was our starting point. And the committee has been fleshing out that organizational chart with more detail to ensure that we've got not only the people associated with the particular positions, but contact information, and creating a simple one-stop shop guide document that can be shared both internally and externally. That is primarily completed at this point. There's still the only piece here is that we're waiting, as you can see on the next one as well, for the rebranding committee is doing some structural work. So we want to make sure that whatever comes out of this is jiving with the work of the rebranding committee. So the second objective is more about structure and process for those same roles. Initially, the committee was working on two separate documents, internal and external. And what came clear through the process as they went through and determined best paths forward, that frankly, the internal and external were similar enough that we could serve both roles or both purposes with the single document. So in the interim, they've been gathering departmental summaries. They've asked each department in ISD, of which, as you can imagine, there are many, as we've gone through to uncover these, for a brief summary to put together. They're close to complete with that particular step. And again, once the rebranding committee's structure is once that work is allowed to kind of integrate with the work that this group has done, the goal is to have a document with those summaries on the website, as well as in print form with a brochure type product, and put that in for targeted completion in May of 2021. So this group really became more about information gathering and synthesis around that work. As you'll see, there's some crossover, and this group got together and was trying to ensure, along with rebranding and communication, that they were all not stepping on anyone's toes and making sure that they got through their niche. So this information gathering is near completion, and we anticipate having products by the end of the school year.
Thanks, Matt. Next, we'll have our Climate and Culture Committee, and that's Corey Ann Street and Caitlin Larrabee.
Yep, hi, so I'm going to get us started. So our team has been working on enhancing existing structures and also creating some new systems to promote a positive work climate and culture. So when we first started, some of the top priorities we used to guide our work were that we wanted to increase the extent to which staff feel celebrated for good work, that they feel cared for by their colleagues, and that they feel a sense of belonging in the workplace. And so this led us to 3 subdomains within our group, which are health and wellness, social connection, and staff recognition. And so we started this pre-pandemic. The pandemic certainly created an increased sense of urgency for that health and wellness group specifically. So that's led to the merging of multiple committees and representatives from discipline groups to work on this common goal, which has been amazing to see. So this includes members from our Prepare group, school social workers, school psychologists, social emotional learning committee, building mental health liaisons. I'm sure I'm missing people too, and our existing group that had started originally. So they've been doing a lot of great things this year. So some of the logos on this slide you see are things that have been communicated to staff already this year. So there's weekly wellness all staff emails that go out with positive messages, tips, event opportunities, and then health and wellness contests with prizes. And I think overall, it's just great that we're communicating the message that we as an organization really care about how our staff are feeling, making sure they're caring for themselves and that that's valued. So that's been really exciting. And then after further reflection this school year, now that we're in the pandemic, the Social Connection Committee is hoping to integrate with that existing Health and Wellness Committee to support their work with a specific lens of that social emotional piece. So right now that group is hosting a Help Students Thrive supply drive to benefit the pantry at New Campus. And there'll be additional opportunities like that going forward. So with that, we can go to the next slide, and Corey Ann Street is gonna chime in as well.
Thanks, Caitlin. So when we were looking at our third goal, the Staff Recognition Committee, we're looking at developing a staff recognition system that promotes a culture that celebrates accomplishment, shows care for each other, and encourages a sense of belonging. And we're excited to announce that our projected launch date is right after spring break, April 6th. So this committee's been working really hard on a data dashboard system. So the entire staff recognition system is called Sailors, and it's an online platform that allows for more frequent informal recognition in real-time email. What's great is anyone within our ISD staff members can recognize and show appreciation to other staff members. And it's through a simple Google form that's linked to our values. And the responses then are tied to a data dashboard system, which you can see is on the slide there, which displays the data in a variety of ways. So we can look at each month, we could look at by sale value, and also which department or which staff is recognized for the month. So it's really nice in that it allows a team of people to break down and look at those different components. In addition, additional survey was sent out, which identified a need for more frequent formal recognition throughout the year. So on top of that frequent informal recognition, we're looking at a more formal recognition. And the team had come up with a monthly Sailors on Deck formal recognition. And that's going to be through the Check It Out newsletter. So it will be linked to the data dashboard, in which each month, one person from the sailors will be highlighted in the monthly Check It Out newsletter and then shared at the month's board meeting. So that just allows for more formal recognition in an organization of our size. And then hopefully someday it will be tied to some kind of North Ed swag that can be received for whoever is that Sailors on Deck recipient of the month. And again, it's tied to the values and mission and vision of our organization. And then last, what we did is we built upon the existing Standard School Award by creating a nomination form with eligibility criteria. So that's a traditional award that's given out at the end of each year, and the tradition began in 1986. So really this group just created a nomination form that anybody within our organization can access. And we created eligibility criteria that is again based on our organization's vision, mission, and values, and having an employee that's been a minimum of 5 years in our organizations, similar to before. So we just took the existing award and kind of built upon that with a nomination form and eligibility criteria. And our hope is to share all of this information out to everyone by next month so that it's ready to go by spring break. So any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple, unless someone else wants to jump in. But explain the Standard School Award to me a little bit more. I didn't quite catch the history of that. And then have you guys also thought to put it on Facebook, that Sailors on Deck, mention that we're doing in the newsletter, to just make sure it goes out to social media and highlight our employees?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we're drafting right now a communication to go out through email on the staff intranet and on the portal. And we can definitely put that on the Facebook platform as well so that everyone can access that. So that's a great recommendation. Thank you. And then with the Standard School Award, and anybody else can speak to this too, but it's an award that's given out by the superintendent to one individual within our organization who demonstrates outstanding performance related to job responsibilities and kind of goes above and beyond the expectations. And there's a plaque that lists the names of all the recipients located in the administration building. And it began in 1986. So I know Renee is really wonderful about putting on that ceremony at the end of the year to award that Standard School Award. So that's just a little bit of background, and Renee or anybody else, feel free to chime in on that Standard School Award too.
Well, one of the things, Jason, is that when they had one-room schoolhouses, it's my understanding that if they had superior performance, that they became a standard school. Dr. Seglerek, maybe you know something more about the history of it, but I think Dick Asiala started it. Renee, you may know too. But that's why it's called the Standard School Award. It was an award given to one-room schoolhouses. So
is that name something that everyone's really attached to? Or is there an opportunity for us to possibly rebrand that to, I don't know, tie in with the True North School Award or something that would tie into the name of our organization?
That's a good point.
I mean, I don't know, maybe it's like maybe it needs to be called Standard School Award, but that sounds a little bit odd to me as an outsider. I didn't know the award existed, and it feels a little antiseptic to me. It feels a little boring, and it feels like something I would ignore.
Well, it would appear from your remarks that you've done so successfully.
Yes, I have. Anyway, it was an idea that maybe if we branded it something that would be tying to the organization, like, the True North Award or the, I don't know, Points North Award or something North.
Yeah, that really gets me excited. True North, man. I got the True North Award. But anyway.
I've just got a quick question. I came in late and I'm sorry, I had an emergency in our family, but did I understand that it's 5 years and longer that they've been employed? Is there anything for like newer staff, or have you thought about maybe somehow recognizing those new folks that are trying to get engaged and feel sometimes that makes them sticky? It's not a bad idea. I'm just curious, but I wanted to make sure I understood that they had to be here at least 5 years. And I apologize for being late, everyone. Sorry.
No worries. Great question, Liz.
So I'll kind of chime in, but again, anyone else feel free to chime in. Definitely open to changing the name. I think our group also had that same conversation about, do we want to update the name to reflect more of our even the sale, or now could it be the North Ed? And I think there was kind of that wondering of, well, do we stick with tradition or do we completely revamp? So again, completely open to that feedback, and we can even send out an additional survey if people want to kind of keep to the traditional name or change that. So we'll continue to have that conversation. And then in terms of for newer staff, so I think the existing standard school award kind of focuses on that five or more years. However, our monthly Sailors on Deck would be open to all staff, so including all staff. So that would be that monthly recognition through our Sailors dashboard system, where one person will be selected and highlighted in that monthly check it out. So that can include new staff members. And again, that's open to everyone within our organization.
So I'm just going to comment that I'm a huge traditionalist, and I think tradition is a great thing. But maybe if we just upped our education on why that award is named what it is, I think we can make it something great again.
Well, anyone else with something we should maybe decide how we want to handle that at a future meeting and go back to this committee and see, listen to recommendations. But I'm sure we have 7 different opinions on the board about what it ought to be called.
Well, and I think I know that the committee appreciates the board's feedback, and they still meet regularly, and will review that and then provide the board with an update. I think probably back in May when we get things rolling. So great job, Corianne and Caitlin. Thanks so much.
I comment.
Yeah, Jim.
I appreciate all the good work you're doing on this committee, but I just want to remind you that there are people who do not like to be recognized the way most people like to be recognized, and to recognize that and really see where people are and what that good way of giving recognition to people who don't like any spotlight, and work that somehow into the things you're doing here. That's all.
Yep, I will respond to that just quickly, that we totally thought about that too, and especially people in education are funny where they like don't want to be acknowledged necessarily for all the great things they're doing. So I think that's the nice thing about the Sailors component, is it's an email that's private to you. So like I could send an email to my occupational therapist who's on my team, who's did something really excellent that I wanted to recognize her for, and it's just an email that only she's going to receive with some comments from me and feedback. So I think at least that way privately she can read it, and it doesn't have to go beyond that necessarily. So that gives that opportunity too.
Great.
And I think too, just to piggyback on that, for that monthly Sailors on Deck, from my understanding, once that person is selected based on the dashboard system, Renee's going to reach out to that person, and they have the opportunity to politely decline if they don't want to be recognized in the check it out as well.
Great, thank you.
Great comments. Any other comments? All right, thanks so much. We're going to continue on with our assess safety protocols, and Tim Vandermeulen and Melinda Gardner.
Good afternoon, everybody. So our safety team identified one remaining goal that we would like to complete before the end of the school year, and that is to finalize our emergency operations plan that was developed for our organizational agency. And this is a document that includes specific operations and protocols for all of our ISD-owned facilities related to crisis preparedness and response. And this is a document that's required to be reviewed annually, with a biannual report required to be submitted to the Board of Education. So we recognize that in order to finalize this document, we need some training. And so we are going to be offering a prepare training to our identified safety team members from each program and site, and then to any administrative stakeholders that are also wanting to be part of the training. So currently, and this is a point of pride, I think, for our agency, is that we have 9 certified prepared trainers employed, 7 school psychologists, and 2 social workers. And this is a program that is endorsed by the National Association of School Psychologists, that was designed to address safety protocols and procedures related to crisis preparedness and response, specifically to be implemented within the educational system. So it's a perfect fit. And so we are going to be, 3 of our certified trainers are going to be offering our Workshop 1 training in April, and we've selected 2 dates that are going to take place after school, knowing that we have a bit of a sub issue currently. And again, that's going to be targeted toward our identified safety team members and then any administrative stakeholders, again, like I mentioned. So after that training is completed, our committee members feel fairly confident that we will be able to finalize our EOP with each of our programs and sites. And then potentially, and this would be something we'd like to also try to complete, is any safety or crisis response protocols. So for example, engaging in some tabletop exercises or additional entry safety training with our TBAISD liaison officer. We were able to complete some of that before we broke last year. We'd like to continue that work as well. So really we'll recognize that we've finalized or finished our goal when we have that completed EOP document. So that's really the biggest artifact we're looking for to finish out this work. Any questions? All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, Melinda. I really appreciate your leadership on that committee. Next, we're going to turn it over to Jana Macetta and Aaron Ryan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Erin. Jana and I have had the privilege of working with our committee this past year on a pretty lofty goal, exploring, assessing, and identifying regional programming needs or gaps across our entire region and across the entire continuum.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our first objective was to outline specific content areas of focus. So after our first meeting, we broke down our goal into manageable parts, and we decided to narrow our focus to general education, special education, early childhood, and English learners. And then we formed subcommittees for each of those focus areas so we could precisely collect a baseline of information regarding the programs, curriculum, and supports available across the region. And then each subcommittee developed a survey, and some surveys were focusing on content areas and social emotional learning, and other surveys were focusing on staff perception to gain an understanding of what resources are being utilized to support learners.
So we're at a point right now where the surveys have been finalized and they have been sent out as of the end of January. We are sort of in a holding pattern because we're giving our local districts some time. We want to get information that is really meaningful to our work as we move forward. And so we have scheduled meetings for the rest of the year, all the way through May, where our team will be getting together. We're going to be reviewing and analyzing the survey data.
Yep, and our goal by the end of the year is to create a gap analysis matrix. So to take that baseline data and have an organized matrix so we can carefully lay out those results of the initial surveys.
And I would just let you know that we did link our more detailed summary of our goal within this PowerPoint, and it has links to some of the different surveys if you wanted to.
Does anyone have any questions?
I just have a quick one. Was it hard to narrow down what you wanted to address? Did you feel like there were a lot more to, like these are the priorities, but there were a lot more residual that you want to kind of constantly push forward as well, I would guess?
Yeah, it was certainly a challenge because we want to look at the entire continuum from pre-K all the way to post-secondary. So we happen to be very fortunate and have quite a few of our service area supervisors on our team. So, you know, all these brains together, we were able to narrow down those 4 focus areas to start with. We know that this is only a baseline for something much bigger.
Yeah, that brings me to my question is, have you gotten any feedback about like what comes next? I mean, if I were on the receiving end of a survey, I'd want to know what my end goal is. So we identify the gaps. Has anyone asked, okay, so now that we're doing this work, what happens after that? I mean, how did you communicate that next step to people?
And when we requested to receive that survey information, we said this is just our initial step of gathering information, and there may be additional surveys or requesting additional input from our stakeholders. And I know as a group that's been a discussion overall of, okay, so we know we're going to gather this information, identify gaps, what will be our next step? And we felt that, you know, once we have that time to review the data, then we can kind of proceed there and hope to then communicate to stakeholders.
I mean, the great thing about it is, you know, once you let people identify gaps in any setting, it lends itself for massive disappointment if you're unable to fill the gaps. And of course, it's going to come down to resource allocation. You know, which gaps take which priority level, and there's a shortage of resources for everything. But I think it's great because if I were on the other end of this, helping to identify the gaps and knowing that a shortfall where you just let those gaps exist would make it even worse. I know that we're committed to fixing whatever gaps we've got. So it's a great thing. Great thing.
Our hope too is that maybe some of those gaps that are identified are already resources we provide in the ISD, and maybe locals or even within, you know, whoever our stakeholders are unaware of those resources, and then we can help coordinate, you know, access to our current resources and supports.
Yeah, it's great.
You know, that really brings up 2 really important items. Number one, when drafting, so this is our first go at strategic planning with respect to being specific on what those goals are. And so when we're drafting those goals, we want to be mindful that you know, we want to be narrow enough so that people understand precisely what we're looking at. The other item, and Jana, you said it really well, is that the reason why we need to explore, assess, and identify is because it may not mean that there exists a gap. It's just matching up people's identifying a possible gap with solutions already exist. And now we just need to communicate what those solutions are. So great work. Really appreciate your leadership on this and moving this forward. Any other questions before we move on?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Next, we're going to talk about relationships with our principals, and Matt Nausatis and Lisa Klepper.
Hello, good afternoon. We were privileged to chair this SAIL goal, which was establishing those meaningful partnerships with local principals. And as we were jumping in, we noted that what was identified as a rather specific need in the initial information gathering for the formation of the SAIL committees has kind of shifted now that we're in phase 2. So the original intent has shifted a little bit based on the feedback from our district member stakeholders. So when we look at our objectives, our first one was just to dip into that resource. What do they need? What do they have? I don't want to say gaps, Mr. Tank, but where are areas that we can bolster our partnership with them? And when we redid that survey this year, we found that the overall feeling was of being supported, which was great, right? They feel like we are in true partnership with them. Not that there's room for improvement, But because of the outcome of that survey, which was not necessarily what we were anticipating, we had to shift our work midstream. So what we have in process right now is just continuing that collaboration with local area principals around how we're formatting our meetings with them. So we have principal meetings at the elementary, middle, and high school level, and they are all run very differently and for different purposes. But what we are noting is a lot of our district members are K-12 with, having that leadership being responsible for K-12. Is there a different way that we could organize these meetings and provide information in a more timely manner so they're not attending 3 different meetings every month? So we're working on that. We're also working on establishing that best practice PD for all regional principals. We noted that that's an area we have a lot of exceptional professional development for our itinerants and our teachers within our ISD and our member districts, and we're kind of leaving the administrators out of that. And as we are lifelong learners, what can we do to provide support in that way? It's been super fun, and I think none of this work matters without those positive relationships, and it's been really great as a new administrator this year to make those connections with our member districts. So Matt, is there anything I left out or anything you'd like to underline of importance?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, thank you to Lisa for co-chairing this with me and everyone else on the committee. This has indeed been interesting. I'm looking at it through 2 lenses. Prior to coming to TBA, I was the high school principal in Kingsley. So I attended those meetings from a local administrator's perspective and now working within TBA. So for the last 11 years, I've seen a snapshot of really at the most fundamental level what that true collaboration looks like. And just like what Dr. Sigleric said, when we first created these goals, these overarching goals, this was establish meaningful partnerships with local principals. And what we decided in taking a deeper dive into this is that we can't establish a meaningful partnership until we establish meaningful relationships. So we needed that relationship component to be the single most important thing. So one of the things that we needed to do to investigate that was, because I'm present and Pat Lamb and Brent Borma, as well as Lisa Klepper are present in the high school regional meetings, there's a lot of collegiality, there's a lot of back and forth, and we decided we needed to see what it was like at the elementary and middle school level. So in doing so, we decided we needed to create some consistency and structure with that to make sure that every principal in the region is having an opportunity to have a group of professionals to bounce ideas off of, to foster meaningful relationships with. Because if you're a first-year principal or 25 years in, those relationships mean everything, especially when you really need a partner in crime, or you need a mentor, or you need somebody to understand, not only how to do your job, but if they're not comfortable understanding what TBAISD is, or what we do, or what we can offer them, they're simply not going to ask. So speaking to the point number 4 on the slide, one of the things that we want to do is we want to create a way to pull all of the regional principals together, kind of a convergence of all administrators to promote this initiative so we can speak to it, so they know what we're doing, why we're doing it, but also that's a rallying point that we can have to then have a candid audience and say, look, isn't this great? Isn't this wonderful having us all together? And then go from there with some ideas on how we can implement that consistency and that structure from an elementary perspective, a middle school perspective, and a high school perspective. And we'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
I have a question, but I don't want to keep stepping in front of anybody else. Anyone else want to ask?
I have a question, but you can go, Jason.
Thank you, Nikki. First off, Lisa, you can always just call me Jason. First off. Secondly, I'm hearing all about relationships and fostering relationships and getting together and all of those kinds of things. How much of this are you intending to do through Zoom or Google Meet going forward, considering, you know, we have such a huge area? Or are you anticipating getting together physically? I don't know how you guys do that with 5 counties, with busy people. So, I mean, are you doing a lot of Zoom stuff or planning on doing a lot of Zoom connections with a bunch of principals?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason, and the answer is actually very interesting. And I think Pat Lamb and Brent and Lisa, you've been in these meetings as well. So the high school meetings that I've been a part of for a long time now, we have typically met once a month, and we do it in person, and they're great. And we've had good leadership, and we've had some great conversation. The first hour of which is simply a roundtable, ask anything you want, and we'll help you. But quite frankly, since COVID has hit, and since we've been doing this via Google Meets and Zoom, I would say our relationships have gone to the next level. And our group is even tighter. And the reason is because we're able to meet easier, we're able to meet more efficiently and more often. So where we would normally get, you know, let's just say we normally get 10 principals in a room because the other ones are unable to attend because they don't have an assistant principal or they don't have a dean of students or something occurred in their building that day and they simply can't get away. It's much more simplistic to find the time to jump on a Google Meet for 30 or 45 or 60 minutes than it is to dedicate the drive time and all of that. So my suspicion, and we haven't specifically discussed this, but my suspicion is that moving forward, a lot of this will be kind of, it'll be initiated online. And then it will transition to kind of a hybrid of online and in person.
Yeah, and I saw a follow-up question on that is one metric that you could use to really see if you're really fostering relationships is trying to track whether people are in breakout sessions with a subset of your group. I mean, sometimes you gravitate towards 2 or 3 colleagues. You know, maybe they're one's in Bel Air and another's in Benzie, and it'd be nice to know that the principals are finding, you know, that ear that they can really bounce ideas off of. And they might go into breakout sessions or do their own, you know, subgroupings within this whole idea. Because I think that'd be a great sign that people are really finding, you know, their colleagues around the whole region. So I think it's great. I think you should do as much Zoom as you possibly can. I think it's a fantastic tool.
The last thing I'll say about it is it's been very captivating the last, well, really since March 12th. I mean, there were months where the high school group met every week. We met every week and we would update each other on what we had heard and what was ongoing. So there's a distinction between robust content and relationships. You know, they're not mutually exclusive in that circumstance. We're not talking about curriculum and we're not talking about, you know, legal analysis or school of choice. We're talking about the nuts and bolts of what our job is consisting of in that moment. So that's what's been very interesting about it. And that's why it's important to have this consistency and structure moving forward.
Okay. I had 2 questions, but Matt, you just answered the last one, and that was about attendance of admin in these meetings. So I'm gonna cross that out. But my next question was, Lisa, you said about you know, you had the survey and many were satisfied with what the ISD has to offer. But one thing Matt said that kind of perked my ears is you don't know if you don't ask. And I was wondering, when a new administrator comes on board, is there someone from the ISD that does a welcome to the ISD, just a meeting with them or anything like that to basically, you know, especially if it's someone that is not within the ISD districts, coming on and just, you know, helping them navigate the ISD and also just showing them all the great things we have to offer? Is that something we do, or is that done in our local districts by our superintendents.
Sorry, I was just unmuting. So I'm not sure the specific answer to that question, and there's some more information around why the principals were feeling more supported. So when the survey was first sent out to become a sale item years ago, it didn't seem as supportive. And since then, we've added, and Matt, step in. What is Pam's title? Like Pam and Rick?
They're part of the IST team for Paul Bauer. So that would be a great example when a new principal gets hired and they need support with documentation or curriculum or anything that goes on in their school. My guess is Paul Bauer or somebody from his team would certainly reach out. And I don't want to speak for him, and I don't want to speak for that side of the instructional team because I'm not exactly sure. But I think that the short answer to your question, which is another good question, is yes and no. I think by default there are numerous people that ultimately are answering several questions, but I don't think there's one special person, a liaison that's assigned, and that would be an interesting topic moving forward.
It's such
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa and Matt. Any other questions? All right, we're going to move on to our communications goal and Julie Gordon and Heather Jewell.
Yes, hi. I'll take a start at this. And Julie Gordon and I are leading a group focused on developing a structure and system of effective communication. And I'd like to share a quote by playwright George Bernard Shaw first that says, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." So we have a team of about 14 members. And our first objective is to look at our internal and external audiences. And we've reviewed a list of all the target audiences to ensure that our outreach is inclusive of all the groups, internal and external, that our organization should be communicating with. We then have broken out to divide and conquer, and with our second objective, to outline the current state of who communicates as far as structure, who in the structure communicates, and what that process looks like when we communicate with these audiences. We're working at this point to map out and understand what our current structure and process looks like, which right now, our communication process looks much like an octopus with roller skates, lots of action, but maybe not efficient or effective. So we're working on mapping that out so we can really understand what our current process is, and we can make improvements upon that once we understand it better. We have another subgroup that is working on identifying strategies and supports to implement a communication plan. And this group is looking at potential process improvements. They're researching tech and non-tech strategies and supports to implement an effective communication plan. And then we have a fourth subcommittee group looking at a process of implementation, which will include training. And this will really take place after we really get a better handle on objective 2 and 3. And this group will work to develop an implementation plan with training and the technical assistance to establish new process improvements. And then lastly, we'll work forward looking at plan, do, check, and adjust, and we'll establish a system of checks to make sure that our effectiveness of our plan is actually working, always adjusting as needed. So a lot of work in progress. We've got a great group, and I'd welcome any questions that you might have.
Of course, I have a question, but again, I'm going to listen for other people. No one else? Heather, how has the new branding that we're in the middle of developing, or really we've developed, but now we have to actually implement it? How is that actually weaving into your work, and what kind of challenge is that creating?
So you'll see that a lot of the work in several of these strategic plan groups will lean on each other. And with the rebranding, that implementation of the rebranding aligns very closely with the work that we're doing with the structure and system of effective communication. So both of those groups will really inform each other and help roll the process through as we move forward with rebranding and as we discover research in the structure and the system of communication that we need to fine tune. I'm actually on both teams, and so I'm able to keep those dots connected. And as we continue working with Emily Mitchell with Nielsen Design, she is providing some guidance in regard to the rebranding and the implementation process with the name, which will also weave right into our mapping and our process improvements for structure and system of communication.
Great. Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Heather. Appreciate your leadership and the immense amount of time that you've been putting into the rebranding efforts and the communication. So thank you. Next, we're going to go to facilities, and Yvonne and Sean.
Yes, thank you. Our committee includes 2 non-ISD staff members. We have Mary Manor, who represents our regional early childhood groups, and we also have Jeff Hogue from GMB Architects, and Jeff will be working with us on our facilities study. We've identified 2 objectives for our group, and they are both related to the existing facility needs study. So our first objective is to supplement the work being done by GMB by gathering data on instructional and programming needs. And we have identified 3 key areas of career and technical education, or the CTC, special education, and early childhood. And our second objective is to identify a system to capture staff input related to program needs on an ongoing basis. Because we understand that what might not be identified as a need right now could come up in a year or 2. It could be either enrollments change or programming changes. So we want to be able to capture employee feedback on a regular basis.
Thanks, Sean. So for our strategies, a lot of these really were around collection of stakeholder feedback. So facilities decisions were really held historically at more of a central office standpoint. And while custodians may have a conversation or frontline staff may be having those conversations, the decision making didn't necessarily include those stakeholders to the greatest extent possible. And so one of the strategies is actually modeled after a process by our colleague Mark Wills, who worked with his Oak Park staff to really determine at Oak Park what was really at the core of needs for facilities and infrastructure, some of that, the instructional implications for the surroundings that we're sitting in. And so this Monday, we'll actually lead supervisors through a process to be able to document those with their staff over the next month. More generally, the idea that some folks wouldn't report this to a supervisor, so having a general process for stakeholders to continue to offer feedback. And then on an ongoing basis, knowing that a facilities study will happen no less than every 5 years. And so things like the roof and the technology and the walls holding up the buildings will be structurally sound and taken care of. But the idea would be, again, that short-term, like immediate needs would be identified as well as long-term needs. And so thinking through with our technology services colleagues around a platform or process to be able to capture those thoughts as they're occurring with our team members. Thoughts or questions for the facilities and infrastructure group?
Yeah, I have a question. Once you're done with, I mean, this is not done. This is a process that happens ongoing, constantly. and then layered in with new information. How does it feed back to the finance side of things? I mean, what's going to be the mechanism of taking this input? And I kind of see it as layers. I mean, this year, next year, the year after that, longer term things. Time moves forward and sort of creates this matrix of layering of needs. How does it tie back to the budgeting process and the financial side?
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. And Sean, feel free to hop in. Linda Blecki sits on our committee as well as Sean Biddle. So we have great fiscal minds at the helm, sort of guiding and supporting that process. The committee, Jason, will then take that information and it'll be directly used. So, right, like the idea is we're not wishing and dreaming for swimming pools for the ISD and, not pie in the sky thinking, but really thinking through those instructional implications for the facilities and infrastructure, and really doing short-term, long-term, and planning alongside of our brightest fiscal colleagues here at the ISD.
To add to that, Jason, the work that this committee does, we've intentionally tied it in with that 5-year facility study that is specifically identified in our financial policy that we look at to identify facility needs and make sure that we are funding those 2 years in advance whenever possible. So there really is a very direct tie-in to the work that we did on the financial policy committee with this committee.
That's great. I appreciate those comments, and I think it's just a little premature to determine what the funding mechanism is going to be until we know really what the priorities are, what the needs are, and then we'll have that conversation. We've been fairly conservative in our approach to ensure that we have dollars dedicated to making sure that our facilities are up to par, and that will continue moving forward. And that's part of the reason why we established the financial policy as such as well. So.
Yeah. So Nick, like I totally, everything is resource constrained. It always will be. And so this identification, the assessment, identification of the needs, along with a 5-year study, that's kind of a rolling 5-year study. Who at the end of the day, or what subgrouping of people at the end of the day do apply that prioritization against that constrained resource of money? Who does that? How does that get determined? The prioritization of what gets done, what needs to get done now versus later, and all of that. Is that you, or is that a subgroup of people?
Yeah. So that's the purpose of this committee is to make those recommendations to our financial executive team and myself, and be able to vet through how that mirrors with our facilities plan, how it mirrors with our values as an organization and where we're headed. And then ultimately we'll be providing a recommendation to you as to how we're going to move forward with that.
Okay.
It seems as though a lot of what Jason's bringing up is more about wants than needs, because this group is looking at the needs, and then through communication, which is good communication, which the other groups have talked about, that comes forward, and we look at the wants and how we would do that, and then prioritize. Is that correct?
Yeah, I hope we can get to the wants someday. But the reality is that we're going to have a strong list of needs that we're already experiencing, and so those are the ones that we're going to be prioritizing as we recommend to you how we move forward. But yes, you're right. If we're fortunate enough to be able to get to those wants, then it's going to be, trying to sift through those in a real systematic way as we provide recommendations to you. So, okay, thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate your leadership. We're going to move on to Lee Kennedy and Ashley Troy around professional learning.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Sigleric and the board, for giving all of us this opportunity to share the work. It's very much appreciated. So what you see up on the screen now are the 8 objectives for the Professional Learning Committee that started their work this year. And our overarching goal is to ensure that we're providing high quality, relevant professional development to the region, as well as internal staff here at TBA. And I want to make note that this learning committee is really grounding all of our work and using the research from Learning Forward, which is a national educational organization that consolidated around a lot of the research around what makes a professional learning system effective. And they created a state level and an district level guide to the steps that need to be in place to ensure improvement and creation of an effective professional learning system. So we're using that to kind of guide our work. And we wanted to highlight some of the objectives for you now. So we've completed the first one. We are using the Michigan Department of Ed's professional learning standards. We've created a vision to provide high quality, relevant professional development to internal and external staff, as well as community partners. And we have adopted a professional learning definition that really highlights the importance of not having standalone professional learning for adults. We're going to have varied professional learning opportunities, such as professional learning communities, professional learning that revolves around student data and analyzing that data, implementation supports for specific initiatives, as well as leadership training. So we've completed the first objective, and Ashley will talk a little bit about the second one.
Thanks, Lee. So we have our committee formed from multiple people from across the organization representing different discipline groups. So one of the things that they did is reach out to their discipline groups to talk about and gather information around what professional learning is being offered within the organization to support their role, and what could be some future state for opportunities that would be necessary in order to improve capacity within roles within the organization. So we collected some internal stakeholder data, and then we also sent a survey out to TBAISD staff, and we will be sending the survey out to principals and teachers here actually tomorrow to collect information around how has professional learning gone at the ISD with their experience, what are future topics they are interested in attending, and kind of when and what format would they like that in now that people are being more well versed in virtual learning. So as of right now, what we've collected, 122 responses, and a lot of people are interested in continuing with Zoom-like or Google Meet sessions because they found them so impactful in shorter amounts of time. So we was going to talk a little bit about kind of our next steps, I think.
Sure. So we're working within our unified talent system, which houses our professional learning now. It's what we kind of see when we go on our TBA website. And we're working to improve the operations that exist within that. For example, the opportunity for participants to evaluate the professional learning that they have received, to also follow and track the progress of implementation of strategies learned within those professional learnings. As far as developing long and short-term plans to guide professional development for this upcoming year and even into the future, we're going to be using that survey data along with the data that's already inside of Unified Talent related to how many people have attended various trainings to create a PD plan for next year, as well as kind of like a 3-year long-term look. As far as next steps, we're going to be analyzing that data and then reviewing or considering the need for potential additional professional learning policies. So I want to thank the committee members that have been a part of this work. They're a great group. They have a great perspective, and it's a diverse perspective, so it's appreciated. What questions might there be?
Hi, Lee. This is Rachel Berge.
Hey, Rachel.
I'm wondering if you've had any information about Michigan Registry versus the Unified Talent as a means of tracking professional development, career pathways. You're familiar with that at all?
We haven't looked at that specifically, like an and or a versus within relation to unified talent, but it certainly could be a consideration.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I was just going to say, Lee, aren't you really glad that the person who called you didn't have a just was an unknown caller as opposed to some funny name that you have in your contact list?
I really apologize for that. I actually thought I had turned it down too.
It can happen to any of us at any time, but that was a good one. Unknown caller is a good one.
Any questions? What I'd like to say is, again, appreciate Lee and Ashley's leadership. And, you know, I think it speaks volumes for our commitment to work across groups. So obviously Ashley is a part of our instructional services team and general education. And Lee works so closely around our special education curriculum. So you can see we're being intentional and appreciate their partnership and leadership with our professional learning. So thank you for that. And then we're gonna go to Rachel White and Ashley Darga and talk a little bit about access to programs.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Our group has been tasked with researching, enhancing, and communicating access to our ISD programs. We began our work by identifying 3 objectives that we're working through. The first is to compile and organize the current processes for access to the programs, which we've just completed. We're planning now to move into communicating those processes to other SAIL teams. We found that there are several SAIL teams whose work overlaps with ours, and so we want to make sure we're in touch with them. And then our next objective as we move forward into the spring here will be to collaborate with those teams and develop a plan that communicates that access. So to that end, a few things that we've done so far. Of course, we had to ensure that we had good representation across the ISD. Our team was a little light in the beginning, so Rachel and I went on a recruitment mission and brought in some additional people. We did meet with those other SAIL committees that complement our work to make sure we're not duplicating efforts. There's a lot happening in the communication sphere and in the programming sphere, so we wanted to be strategic and efficient with that. Very much huge thanks to Heidi Argue. She helped us develop a methodology for collecting our data. We came up with an interview framework, so we were able to reach out to program coordinators and representatives of different areas within the ISD and really dig into how students, families, local districts can access their programming. And we now have that all documented in a rather impressive spreadsheet, I have to say. It's quite the document. So we've just completed those steps. Going forward, we're looking to pose some questions to see what we can do for that enhancement section. How can we enhance access to our programs? And then, of course, we'll move into developing and implementing our communication plan. So Rachel, is there anything you want to jump in and add?
No, just reiterating that there are several groups where our work crosses over or complements one another. And I think our end product is may depend heavily on some work of some of the other committees as far as that communicating out, whether it's the rebranding committee as part of our work will probably live in technology somewhere website wise, and then the communication committee, because it can't just live in one place. This information needs to get out in multiple ways to multiple different stakeholders. So I expect potentially a pause and at the very least a lot of coordination with other committees as we move forward.
Great. What questions could we answer for you?
I almost feel bad asking a question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When you say access to programs, who are we talking about accessing programs? Who is this aimed towards? Like students, or is it educators? What are we talking about?
Yes. And that's what we've discovered as we conducted our interviews. There's several layers of access depending on the program. So, for example, I'm at the Career Tech Center, and most of our programs, we're communicating access to families and students, and it's fairly straightforward. But there are other programs where a student might need to be evaluated, or that initial request might need to come from a principal, a teacher, even a physician. So we're really trying to tease apart what are those different layers of access and who needs what information at what time.
Great.
So those conversations have just started happening for us. There are some where access to center-based programming, for instance, as supervisors and itinerant staff need one level of access, where parents and would need a different level of access. So we're just starting to have those conversations, and I think Heidi and just getting information back to us that we can have different levels of access within our website or those kind of web-based applications. So that'll be great. And I almost would have felt bad if you didn't ask a question.
Yeah, I know it's almost gotten to that point. So I'm just doing it for show now. I'm teasing. Thank you very much.
And I just saw a question pop up in the chat as part of the plan to utilize community partners to help communicate or facilitate. I don't think we've gotten that far yet, but it's a great idea, and it's certainly something that I think we'll be discussing.
Great. Any other questions? Thanks so much, Ashley and Rachel. And then finally, a huge shout out to Jennifer Stairs and Tom Mills and Heather Jewell. As the board is aware, we've had several presentations. We are beginning the conversations with our community, and we are slowly making that transition from TBAISD to Northwest Education Services. The board's already seen and approved the formal symbol and the presentation, and just an update on where we're at, and then I'll turn it over if Jennifer or Tom or Heather would like to add anything. But we've begun kind of this slow, soft rollout. I've introduced the new system to some priority audiences. I'm excited to report that we've got the formal endorsement of all of 3 of the former ISD superintendents, 3 mics, and I had an opportunity to review because I wanted to honor the history and what they brought to the table. They were very excited about this. We also know that Nielsen Design Group will be finalizing the deliverables on the logo and the system design. That going to happen by the end of this month. In March, again, we're going to be, in February, the end of February, we are going to do another town hall meeting with our internal staff so that they can see the final product and understand kind of the timeline and what we're going to be doing. In March, we'll be introducing the new brand to school families via a letter, introduced to the broader community via a press release. And then in April through August, we're going to be beginning to transition to the new name. A reminder to everyone, it's going to be for quite some time Northwest Education Services, formerly TBAISD. We're going to have to make sure that people understand that this is an organization rich in history, and this transition will take a period of time. And then obviously, in September during opening day is when we're looking at that really hard launch, rebrand launch, and with some swag and all the things that go with it. So with that said, Jennifer or Tom or Heather, anything to add on the rebranding front?
Just like to point out that we are now just entering the phase where it's really getting down to the nitty-gritty as far as implementation. And Heather and Heidi are just doing a tremendous job organizing that. We're working on Gantt charts and things like that to actually not miss anything or anybody. And it's pretty complicated, but they're doing a great job. It's been a lot of fun working on this project. Our main goal, of course, was to, the issue was a lot of people in the community and that we serve don't really know who we are or what we do. And this system will really, I think, answer that. So it's exciting. Jen, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I can just throw in that the Gantt chart that Tom mentioned is going to be really important, and we're just starting to build that. And it's looking at all the individual departments and the people who will need to do certain things in order to make the transition happen. So just for an example, the technology department has a lot of things that they need to do, from something small like an email signature to something large like changing our email addresses and changing the website address. So the Gantt chart lays all of that out, and we're, like I said, we're just starting to get into the details of building, what are all the pieces the financial department needs to do, the tech department, and so on and so forth.
Jason, you have a question?
Yeah. What kind of chart is it? Gang chart, you said? What was it?
Gantt. Gantt. No, timeline chart of what has to be done when. I learned about that myself.
Is that an education term, or am I just completely adult?
I think it's a business term.
Manufacturing.
Oh, wow.
Manufacturing.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Wonderful job.
So with that, I would like to thank all of the leaders that have been putting in countless hours into this work. As you can see, there's a lot of overlap that takes place. There's a lot of collaboration. But I truly do appreciate, and I know the board does as well, all the extra time, energy, and effort. It's really moving our organization forward in a real positive direction. So with that, I turn it over to you, President Fisher. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. I assume that the next steps, Roman numeral 3 in our agenda, were just covered by you.
Yeah, the next steps really include, revisiting some of these, giving you another update in May prior to our June meeting, in the event that there might be any action items or policies that need to come before you. Yeah, at this point, we're just rolling up our sleeves and continuing to move the work forward.
Thank you for this update today. It was valuable and informative and all those things. Board members, anything that you want to bring under next steps? Any questions, comments? If not,
I do have a comment, Joe.
Sure, go ahead, Rachel.
First, I just want to say nicely done. I really appreciate all of your hard work and your reporting out to us. My one comment, possible feedback, is I really appreciated being able to see the in progress, the completed by each goal within the PowerPoint. So perhaps in May, if that suits your needs as well, it'd be nice to be updated with what's been maybe not started, in progress, and complete. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else?
Yeah, just, my compliments to the unbelievable amount of work that everybody is doing in the face of trying to figure out how to educate and support our schools during this pandemic. It's really impressive, and kind of aligned with the rebranding. All of these different work groups have important areas of overlap, and it seems to all be coming together so nicely. So just my high compliments to everybody.
Yeah, I have one last thing to say too. I mean, beyond the amazing work of everybody who's done this, I mean, to see that the strategic plan get put to work and come to life like this is pretty fun. So, but my comment is for Nick, and I know it's not just for Nick, and he'll deflect a little bit, but the more that I'm reading in the newspaper around the country about educators not getting access to vaccines, and the struggle that is for communities, I just can't tell you how, and marking this Friday and Saturday with second doses, that Nick and whoever else magically behind the scenes was able to actually get our educators vaccinated in this region is unbelievable. And it's really to be applauded. So I can't tell you how happy I am to see it happening, and sad for other communities. So we did something pretty amazing. And I say we, not really we, you guys, whoever that was. And I assume it was Nick behind the scenes doing a lot of work there. So thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. That's a noteworthy comment. Dr. Siglaric, anything further from you, sir?
No, just thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All right. There being nothing further, we are adjourned. Be safe, everyone.